Good morning, Nairobi. I'm Olivia Otieno. Double O Direct, the woman host music by women and women guests, like the amazing author, Gianne Brownell. Hey, you and I both have 5-year-olds.
Yes, we do.
We've just bonded over mommy baby things. Welcome to Double O Direct.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real treat to be here.
It's a real treat to have you. Now, before we unpack the reason why you're here, which is your new book, tell me about yourself.
So I am originally from Michigan in the United States. I have been a journalist my entire career, which is like almost 30 years, which is so surprisingly scary to me. And I worked first, I started out in CNN. I worked in CNN in Washington, D.C.
And then, just pause. Yeah. Pause. So there I was giving you all these cues. Now,
oh no, what did I do?
And I was like, and then we're going to be doing this, and then this is going to... You wasted like 50... No, just kidding. I loved it. So continue. You're at CNN.
So anyway, worked at CNN for a number of years and then moved to London in 1998 to do a master's degree. At the London School of Economics.
LSE is fantastic.
Yes, I did a history degree there, which people oftentimes ask me economic questions. I'm like, I don't know, I did history. But anyway, I'm like, don't ask me about the economy. That's not my thing.
Do they have history at LSE?
They do. I mean, it's actually technically called the London School of Economics and Political Science. So they have everything from social psychology to,
They should just call it the London School of a lot of different things.
The London School of everything. So anyway, I did my master's there and then ended up staying in the UK. So I've been there for 25 years.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, me too, actually. There are moments when I'm like, why am I still here? And I had some brief stints in Poland. I lived in Poland for a while. And I'm a print journalist now. And now that's been 25 years I've been a print journalist. I mean, I feel like 1998 was like 2 minutes ago. But anyway, and I worked.
Me too, by the way. Yeah, it's so unfair what's happening now.
Oh my God. I mean, I used to say I didn't trust anybody born after 1987, but whatever. I've got to move on from that.
No, me too.
Yeah. Anyway, So and then I worked for Newsweek for a long time on staff, and I've been a freelance journalist now for 15 years, mostly writing about arts and culture, development and education for places like the New York Times. So,
did you meet Christiane Amanpour?
I met her probably way back in my early CNN days, but I don't.
Wolf Blitzer.
Oh yeah, Wolf. I know Wolf very well. I mean, not very well, but I mean, he was. Yeah, I used to kind of give him scripts, and he'd kind of look at me and sort of vaguely give me a smile. So yeah, and my first job in journalism, I was an intern at Larry King Live. Yes.
Oh my.
And actually I have it. Well, I won't bore you with it, but there was
Bore me, please.
There's a guy called Richard Belzer who just passed away a couple weeks ago. He was an actor who was on Law and Order and whatever. Anyway, I used to watch him.
I saw that.
You did? Yeah. So anyway, he'd have done the show called Homicide, Life in the City. It was about Baltimore. And I was obsessed with that show.
Everybody knows Homicide.
Great
Life
show.
in the City, yes.
Great show.
Yes.
So anyway, I was walking through the halls of CNN and I saw him and I wanted to ask him a question about the show. And I went up to him and he kind of blew me off. And Larry King was walking by at the same time. And Larry said, Richard, this woman's asking you a question. Would you mind answering it? And I always had so much respect for Larry King for taking the time to be like, here's this young little production assistant, she's scurrying around the hall and she's trying. And I just really...
Scurrying. She said scurrying. She said scurrying, not the other thing she said.
And so I always respected him. So when I saw that Richard Belzer died, I was a little bit like, you and Larry can chat about that up, wherever you are. Anyway, so that was my sort of one of my many CNN stories. But
Newsweek stories?
Sorry?
Newsweek stories?
Newsweek stories. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I interviewed, George Clooney one time, and I asked him this question. We were getting along.
Is he as good looking as purported?
It was on the phone, and it was pre-Zoom, so it wasn't even a Zoom. But and his father was a journalist, so we were kind of bonding. And I was like, I was feeling like the moment he was talking about his work in Darfur and all of this stuff, and I kind of slipped into like the, oh my gosh, maybe we're friends mode. And I was like, oh, you should read this book called The Fourth Estate or something. Have you read it before? And he's like, no. I'm like, oh yeah, George, you and I aren't friends. Like in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, it was just a funny moment.
Broken the ice.
Yeah, I was like, I thought we were like kind of buddies, and he's like, no, this is an interview. But yeah, and Beyonce I interviewed again on the phone. Lots of great, interesting people. So yeah, it was a great, wonderful place to work. So yeah, lots of fun.
What do you think about? And I'm just digressing here. What do you think about new media? Because I see that you have a lot of experience in print. Print globally is on the decline. I was going to say dying, but let's be politically correct and say it's on the decline.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I'll tell you an anecdote. So when I was at Newsweek back, in the sort of, mid 2000s, I remember when I would be requesting interviews for people, like, for example, let's say like Lucy Liu, the actress, for example, or Bjork. And oftentimes I could only really get them on the website because for the magazine, they were crowded with other stories. And so their PRs would say, well, is it going to be in the magazine or on the website? And I would say, oh, well, I think it's just going to be on the website. And they'd be like, yeah, we're probably, you'd have to really kind of get convince them. And nobody wanted to do the website. And nowadays, when you ask people to do interviews, they're like, well, is it going to be on the website? And I'm like, yeah, but it'll also be in the paper. Okay, as long as it's on the web. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really been interesting to see that kind of change in perspective. And I think that now...
But why wouldn't it be on the web? I mean, there's endless space there. The magazine is limited. But,
exactly. But it's almost like it feels like the idea of being in the newspaper seems very like not that interesting anymore. Whereas like back in the day, it was like if it was in the magazine or the newspaper. It mattered. Exactly. So it is an interesting thing to see change. But, I just like everybody else, I get on my phone in the morning and, check all the apps that I have for news. And so, I mean, it's here to stay.
How many apps does someone need for news?
I've got like 4. And it's funny because, I've lived in the UK for 25 years and all of my apps are American based. I just don't read British news. I just can't be bothered. I barely know who our prime minister is. I'm so tired of the British politics. So anyway, I've got like 4 news apps, but they're all American.
Are you a British citizen?
I am. I'm a dual national.
So they're not going to chuck you off like everybody else?
No, I hope not.
Did you arrive legally?
I did arrive legally. Yeah, and I did the whole thing where I was there for 5 years, and I got I have there's a terrible story. I got my British citizenship where it was like I was just like 6 weeks away from being able to apply, and they changed the law because they love to kind of do these things. And so I had to wait a whole nother year in my work permit, and it was but I did get it in the end, and so I'm a dual national now, which is a good thing, and sometimes not. I joined because I wanted to be a member of the European Union, but don't get me started on Brexit. So,
Double O Direct, SpiceFM with Gianne Brownell, an American author who launched her latest book at the Muthaiga Club this week. It's the Muthaiga Country Club, right? Yeah, yes. It's the Muthaiga Country Club. My bad. Forgive me. I was supposed to be there. I just couldn't make it. But you're giving me reasons to go back to London because you and I need to be friends. Like not like digital friends, but real
proper
life.
Real.
Yeah. I'm feeling like this thing is happening.
I love that we're talking on the break about all these things. We're like, oh, we got to get back to. Yeah, I mean, there's just like so much. We're like, we just were like totally chatting about all sorts of stuff on the.
So tell me about your transition from not to writer, but from working in media to becoming an author.
So I think most journalists at some point in their career think, I should write a book.
I've been thinking I should write a book.
Yeah. Don't. No, I'm just kidding. So I had probably like 4 different kinds of books that I was trying to write. I was writing a book about like the arts and culture in Central and Eastern Europe because I used to live in Eastern Europe. And then I was writing a book about, I don't even remember, so many different ones.
Yeah.
And then what kind of brought me to this book was that I was wanting to do something about girls' education and sort of the barriers that a lot of young women in the developing world face when it comes to secondary education. So I was in Tanzania and I was sort of volunteering at this school and talking to these women about all of these different barriers that they face, everything from long walks to school to issues around puberty, etc. And I was coming back through Nairobi, and I was going to write a story about Elizabeth Njoroge, who founded Ghetto Classics.
Shout out, Elizabeth. We love you.
Hey, Liz. And I was so struck by what was happening at St. John's Community Center, where Ghetto Classics is based. Anyway, long story short, so I just, I tried to write a book about many things and nothing really kind of stuck. And then this was like, it was like this light bulb went off where it was, I love to write about education. I love to write about female empowerment. I love to write about, the role of civil society and community activism. I love to write about arts. And so it had everything. And so I was like, oh, this is what I should be doing. And so it was more like, I know this is going to sound super cheesy, but the book found me. But like, really, it was like, I just was struggling with this other topic and all these other things. And it kind of all fell into place. And so that's kind of, and I've since written a second book that's not out yet, totally unrelated to Ghetto Classics. But, there was a man that I used to work with at Newsweek called Christopher Dickey, and he was very well known, respected in the sort of journalism world. And I remember one time he came to our bureau in London, and he just finished a book, and he wrote a lot about sort of terrorism and sort of the Middle East and et cetera. And he said, every time I finish a book, I swear I'm never going to write another book. And I was thinking about that when I finished this Ghetto Classics book because I was like, never again. And then I wrote another one. So
it's like children, you know what I mean? You're like, I'm never having, and I'm thinking,
I'm out of diapers, but they're so cute when they're little. Yeah, exactly. I hear you.
How did you meet Elizabeth?
Well, so what happened was I wrote I write for a section called Front Row Center in the New York Times, which is focused on classical music. And so when I knew I was flying through Nairobi, I was like, as all freelancers do, I'm thinking, okay, well, I should maybe do a story. So I Googled what was the sort of music scene here in Kenya, classical and jazz, because that's what this section is specifically aimed at. And I came across the Art of Music Foundation's website and sort of was scrolling through because they do other things aside from Ghetto Classics. They run the Kenyan National Youth Orchestra and they run Safaricom Youth Orchestra. So anyway, and then I see Ghetto Classics and I'm like, well, this is interesting because I'm very interested in kind of, the empowerment of young people from, underprivileged communities. That plays into my development interest. Anyway, so I reached out to Liz and said, I'd love to do a story about you in the New York Times. And she said, yeah, great, let's do it. And I spent 3 days with her. This was in September 2016. And we instantly bonded because Liz, obviously. And she's like one of those people you just really warm to instantly. And I'm like, I want to be her friend.
Yes, I told her that.
And now she calls me her stalker, but that's fine. And then I got back to London and I was looking through my notes and I'd realized that I'd over-reported. And what that is when you have way too much good stuff and you can only use a little bit of it. And I just sort of thought, here maybe is what I should write about. So anyway, so I sent her a message and I said, what do you think about me writing a book, a biography of Ghetto Classics? Because it was at that point coming up to their 10th anniversary. I thought it would be done in 2 years. Meanwhile, 6.5 years later it came out. But and so Liz was like, yeah, let's do it. And so that's kind of where the sort of adventure began, in a sense of me coming back and forth to Kenya several times a year to, meet with the certain characters in my book, including, of course, Celine, who's a wonderful DJ. She's a resident DJ here on your program. Just struck up these wonderful friendships. And, as when you meet people, when you're a journalist, there's definitely this feeling that people tell you a lot about themselves and you're sort of, it's a privilege, but a burden. And I found that, I became so friendly with many of these people that sometimes they told me things that I thought, I want to protect them. I don't want to share these kinds of things because I think so. It was interesting because I tried to remain objective, but there were moments where I thought, so it was a learning experience for me too in terms of writing and
Was your book funded in any way other than by yourself?
Nope.
Biggest challenge, of course, other than the cost of flying back and forth, London, Nairobi. What did you find was one of your biggest challenges in getting this book out?
One of my biggest challenges of getting this book out, well, one of them was, at least in terms of the reporting, was that, as journalists should, fact check. And some of the stories that I was told, I couldn't fact check, and that was sort of difficult at times. So, for example, if somebody told me that, their father used to abuse them or that they got a certain grade in school, I just didn't have a way to fact check that. So that was a bit tricky. And I think, that's sort of what comes to mind in terms of a big challenge, was just, feeling like I was being honest in the book and truthful, but acknowledging that sometimes I couldn't, necessarily get to the exact facts, or got to the facts, but maybe they weren't, it's not how I would usually go about it, if that makes sense.
Moving away slightly from Ghetto Classics and to Kenya in general, how many times had you been to Kenya prior to embarking on this book?
I had been here 3 times before. So the first time I came was in 2007, purely as a tourist. And then the 2 other times I'd come here, they were sort of whistle-stop trips on, actually both of those trips were to Rwanda for reporting trips. And so I, came for a couple of days here and there, but I didn't know Nairobi very well. And at that time, Nairobi, had a bit of a reputation. And so I was I'd come here and be a little bit, nervous, as you do when you're in a city that you don't know very well. And that's been one of the best things about writing this book, is now I feel like I wouldn't say I know the city super well, but I feel very comfortable here. I feel like it's a place that is very dear to me in many ways. And so, yeah.
I'm Olivia Otieno. This is 00 Direct on SpiceFM. Woman host, music by women, and women guests. My guest right now is Gianne Brownell, an American author who her latest book was launched at the Muthaiga Country Club. White lady, Michigan, Ghetto Classics story. Is there any money to be made writing about Ghetto Classics?
There is no money to be made at all. But you know what? I did it because it was a project close to my heart. And I think like you brought up a really great point because, you know, white lady from America, what are you doing writing about these kids from Korgocho? And I mean, I just sort of say, well, because I didn't find them, obviously. There was so much stuff that had already been in the media about them before. You know, local Kenyan papers, you know, Al Jazeera, CNN, everybody had written about them before, but nobody had decided to write a book. So it's sort of like, I feel like, well, I kind of got there first in the sense of thinking that this could be something bigger than just an article.
This is your first book.
First book.
This is your debut work.
This is my first baby. Well, yes, my first book baby. Yes.
Are you getting a lot of press from it, apart from us being here?
Yeah, I mean, I have. I was in People.com, which is a very big U.S. Outlet. There have been a couple pieces in the Kenyan press, which has been lovely, and there's some other international pieces that I think are coming out. And I think part of it is, you know, I'm a journalist, I have lots of connections, but it's also, I think it's such a great story because we live in such like toxic, you know, times where, you know, there are just not a lot of positive stories. And so to hear a positive story and to, you know, I think that really appeals to people, that there's a heartwarming sounds cheesy, but like a story that is makes you feel like, okay, there are things that are great in this world and we need to celebrate those things, those positive things.
How many copies do you print?
So it's through something called KDP, which is Amazon's Kindle, whatever. So it's print on direct. So, you know, you order it on Amazon, for example, and they'll send it to you. They'll print it fresh off the, you know, I ordered, so I came to Kenya on Monday with like 150 books. Like the poor, you know, when I went through passport control, they're like, what? But yeah, so I brought books with me. But yeah, so they're just print on demand. And, you know, so far we've had, you know, a lot of interest. Jill Biden, who was here a couple weeks ago, the First Lady of the United States, she was given a copy. Because she had Ghetto Classics played at an event that she was at. I've had it sent to Barack Obama and to Branford Marsalis. I can't guarantee that they've read it, but they've all received copies because they're, you know, part of that sort of larger Ghetto Classics ecosystem. Branford Marsalis had, you know, jammed with them when he was here for Jazz Fest.
Who is that?
He is a saxophonist, an American saxophonist, very well-known, Grammy-winning saxophonist. And, of course, Barack Obama was here in 2018, and some of the Ghetto Classics kids played for him. Okay. So there's you know, connection. And they played for Pope Francis. So it's sort of an amazing story that these sort of young people from this very difficult place have gone on to become a semi-professional orchestra playing and, you know, recording with some amazing artists from across the globe.
What is the title of the book?
So the title is Ghetto Classics, How a Youth Orchestra Changed a Nairobi Slum. And for me, I think one of the most important things about this book, of course, the music's important. I'm not saying that it's not. But what's, I think, more important is that a lot of these young people became empowered through being in this orchestra, gaining confidence. So, for example, you know, during COVID, a lot of them started a food program within Korgocho to feed older people. They started a program, a garden. They helped get an illegal dump site next to the Dandora dump closed. I mean, they weren't the only people that were working on it, but I think that they got a sense of agency through being involved in this orchestra. And I think that that to me is probably the best part of seeing this is that, you know, it's great that they play music and it's awesome and it's a skill and it's, you know, whatever, but it's that they kind of have learned how to, not learned, but they've become empowered through being involved in this organization. And I think that's sort of my favorite aspect of this story.
The title again?
Ghetto Classics, How a Youth Orchestra Changed a Nairobi Slum.
Was there a little bit of clickbait in that title?
Sort of. And actually it was really interesting because in the beginning of the book, I have a footnote saying why I use the word slum. Because in the United States and Europe, for example, the term slum is very, you just don't use it. You say sort of underprivileged communities or informal settlements. But I wanted to use the local vernacular. And everybody who lives in Korgocho, they call it a slum and they embrace it. And that's
we don't call it an underprivileged community.
Right.
You're right.
Right. Yeah. And I thought it was important. But I've gotten pushback on that where people are like, well, why are you calling it a slum? And why do they call themselves Ghetto Classics? And, you know, very sort of, you know, woke about it. And I'm like, well, first of all, they named themselves. They were the ones that were like, we're from here. We're going to say we're from here. We're really proud to be from here. And I think it's just important that, you know, you do keep the local vernacular and you need to, you know, I think we've become so worried about offending people, but like, who are we offending except maybe ourselves? You're not offending anyway, don't get me started on all that. bang on about wokeness for a long time.
Give me an understanding of the financial implications of writing this book, researching this book, publishing this book.
So initially, I was trying to find a publisher. I mean, I have a book agent, and she took it out to a lot of big name publishing, firms, and nobody really wanted it. I don't know why. It's still unclear. And so I was like, I don't.
Did you get any feedback as to why?
I think part of the feedback was because I was a white American. I was a white middle class American, and who was I to write the story? And part of the reason I thought it was very important to have Elizabeth write a foreword, but also I thought it was important to have her name on the book too, to sort of have people see that it's not just some random person that came in and whatever, that I'm connected to it. I'm sort of so that was kind of a big pushback.
Yeah.
And I think, well, anyway, so the financial implications are I've paid for everything myself. I flew myself out here. I paid for the hotel fees. I'm
looking for dollar amounts. I'm looking for a number. Give me a bracket, because if I want to write a book, I want to understand if I'm living in here and I want to go to London and do a story about Stratford in the East Village or something. I don't know how much that's going to cost me roughly.
Well, I mean, so to publish it, just publishing alone through a small publishing house in Michigan, where I'm from, was about $7,000, and that was having a professional editor. US dollars, sorry.
Okay.
So that was having a professional editor. That was them going through and doing all the sort of graphics and what have you.
Okay.
And so essentially, I need to sell about 1,000 books to make that money back up.
What is it retailing for?
It's retailing on Amazon.com. Amazon.co.uk, it's £15. So I think US is like 17, and here I can never remember the shilling amount, but it's sort of essentially the equivalent of what that would be in
so just
in
under
pounds.
2,000 shillings.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
So publishing it alone was just around 700,000 shillings. You're looking at upwards of 1.5 million.
Something like that. Yeah, something like that. But my whole thing is, I mean, will I be able to recoup the money? I don't know. We'll see. But, it's something that for me was really important that
There's wealth in other ways.
Exactly. And I think that it was like, I wanted to get the word out about, this orchestra. And I think the important thing to also understand is that, there's a portion of the book sales that are going back to the Art of Music's endowment fund, because I think that was important too, was like just that they also kind of reaped some of the, because they shared their stories and they gave me 6.5 years of their time. And so I wanted to sort of give back a certain percentage as well. That was important. So
we're going to talk about the successes, because I'm sure you outlined a lot of successes that Ghetto Classics, have encountered. But also we're going to talk about International Women's Day 2023, what that means to you, especially the theme, which is digital, innovation and technology for gender equality. I'm with author Gianne Brownell. This is 00 Direct. Wrapping up my conversation with author Gianne Brownell. Got myself a book, but I have written that I'm the most intelligent, most phenomenal looking woman you ever met. All right. This is what it looks like. It is Ghetto Classics, How a Youth Orchestra Changed a Nairobi Slum. Ooh. Pulitzer Prize winner Jeffrey Gettleman has said that it's crisp, decisive, fun, and authentic, with a foreword by Elizabeth Njoroge.
yes. Yeah.
I had to get the Pulitzer guy in there. Yeah.
I did. It was just, you had to throw that on the cover.
Right?
Yeah.
I know, right? Yeah. Wolf Blitzer wasn't enough for you.
No, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
I get it. So we marked International Women's Day this last week, and the theme was digital, right? Innovation and technology for gender equality. I could not find a thing about you on the internet.
On the interwebs. I do not have a Twitter account. I did. And I left Twitter because there was a story that I wrote that people sort of bashed me over, which I think was completely and utterly unfair. But anyway, I just felt it was so toxic. And I thought...
Was that the first time you'd been bashed?
Yeah, that was the first time. And
so you were bashed the one time and you were like, I'm done.
I'm done, because my thing was, it was a story about something, well, I won't go into it, but I had written extensively on subjects around it before, and nobody had ever said, great story, love it, or, you really covered this really well in this other story. But like the one story where, there was, for whatever reason, they decided they didn't like it, and it was like coming at me.
Who didn't like it? Like the audience, general public, people you
There
wrote
was one
about?
particular person that didn't like it, who was a well-known figure, and he kind of came after me. He was a journalist and came after me, and I was, and that was it. And I tried to sort of appease, and I realize now you can't appease, you just have to ignore, or I just decided I don't have time for this, because what bothered me was there wasn't a sense of perspective around what it was all about. So I'm no longer, I have a website.
When did you quit Twitter?
So that would have been in 2019, I think it was.
2019.
2019, yeah, 2019.
Come back. You're welcome.
Well, we'll see. Maybe, possibly.
Come back.
I mean, I have a secret account where I like sort of walk, but I don't have a public one anymore. So yeah, I have a secret one that I kind of scan the world.
No, absolutely. Okay, but what does IWD mean to you? I know that digital is not treating you right, but of course you're also on Amazon with your book, so it's a balancing act, kind of.
I think, what does it mean to me? I mean, International Women's Day in general is a very important day. It's just sadly one day. Shouldn't every day be Women's Day?
On Double Direct, let me reiterate that every single day is International Women's Day. I say international because we are streaming worldwide.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
And it should be. But I mean, here's a story that I was sort of thinking of when we were talking about sort of, how does the digital space and, International Women's Day play into it? And there's a woman who used to be in my book club in London. And
a real book club where actual books are read?
Yeah, where actual books are read. Okay. We sit around, we'd have some wine, we talk about the book for 5 minutes, and then we gossip. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, so her name is Lisa Miller, and she is the co-host of Australia Broadcasting Corporation's morning show. So she's very well known in Australia. And on International Women's Day...
But she's in your London book club?
She was, sorry.
Oh, okay.
She was the Law Bureau chief that she went back to Melbourne. Anyway, so she had worn something on Wednesday, and the Twitter trolls went after her. And I was so proud of her because the next day she got on live TV and she just kind of like reprimanded them and said, how dare you? And I think it was really important because I think you need to call these people out. And I think the fact that, it was so peripheral, stupid. It was about something she was wearing or whatever. And I think it's important that, and I say this having now admitted that I don't have a Twitter account, we should all stand up for ourselves online. But I thought it was such of all days to be kind of like saying something about somebody. And I was just really proud to see her sort of standing up. And the comments she got were amazing, saying thank you for taking a stand. And I think it's important to take a stand against a lot of these terrible things that are said. Cyberbullying, huge problem.
Before people needed to come at you right to your face and stick that knife in your belly.
Yeah,
now they can just type away from wherever.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's one of the things that's really I worry. We talked earlier, I have kids and I worry about my daughter. Like right now they're not allowed sort of any kind of technology, but
all sort of no tech
at their dad's house. They are. At my house, it's a tech-free zone.
So no iPad,
no nothing. It's just
no
my
YouTube.
No, nothing. I won't allow it.
They hate your house.
Yeah, but at their dad's house, anyway. Won't get into that. But anyway, point being that I worry about when my daughter reaches whatever age she's at, and she you hear these terrible stories about young girls who they're stories of girls who kill themselves because they've had somebody troll them on Instagram or on TikTok. And I think it's so important that we're talking about these things right now but how do we make it stop? I don't know. Because we talk about it, we write articles about it, we, do documentaries about it, but it still continues. So where do we draw that line? And I think talking about it now around International Women's Day is really important. But I mean, that's, I think it's unfortunately it's here to stay, but I think it's...
Do you feel the platforms have a responsibility to protect their users or to create a more conducive environment for their users?
I think they do. I mean, I think, in terms of, but how do they? I mean, does Facebook really control things? I can't remember exactly, but there was a story where Facebook was taking a stand on something and then they had an advertisement that was exactly directly, juxtaposed to what they were taking a stand on. I think TikTok, I watch my friends' daughters who, wear these sort of like bare midriff tops and they're dancing, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know, like, do you sort of say children over a certain age, under a certain age shouldn't do this? I don't know what the answer is, but I think that, yes, I do think these media platforms should be thinking about it more seriously and really, and I think some of them are, but I think some of them, and I think it depends on where they're located, right? Like some countries have stronger laws. other countries that run social media platforms don't have to feel like they adhere to things. And I had a friend who worked for a social media company that we will not say where it was based, but it's a very popular platform. And she did sort of their social policy stuff, and she left because she just didn't feel that they were listening. They didn't care. They were like, it was all about the money. So I think it's a mixed bag, I guess, is my long-winded answer.
Parting words, Gianne.
Mm-hmm. Parting words. I think it's so exciting to keep coming to Nairobi, to a place that I really adore. And I see, there are some really positive changes happening, not only in sort of the communities that I spend time in, but also overall. But I think that like any country, it has its problems and its issues, but I think it's important that we have voices like yours that are talking about these things. And I think that that's how we move forward, and that's how we empower people, and that's how we create change. So I think really, not to be a sycophant, but thank you for all the work that you do, because I think it's really important for women and men. But I think that's another thing that's important is that, we as women, we also need to empower our men to stick up for us. That's the important thing about girls' education, for example. How do you empower girls? You also educate the boys. Anyway, long-winded answer, but yeah, thank you so much for letting me come today.
The name is Gianne Brownell. The book is Ghetto Classics, How a Youth Orchestra Changed a Nairobi Slum. Get it on amazon.co.uk. Just look for it on Amazon.
Exactly.
Because there's a lot. Thank you so much for spending all this time with me and for this amazing autographed copy.
Thank you so much.
Dig right into it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you very much.
SpiceFM.